Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call to order the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force's Steering Committee for June 10th, 2026. It's 1 p.m. and we're meeting in a hybrid format today. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Welcome, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Good to see you all. We will go ahead and get rolling. Our first, looks like we are close to a quorum.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Yay. Okay, we will go into item number 2, which is the 2026 annual report.
Thank you, everyone. Can you see the report up on your screen?
Yep.
I'm just going to go through a few outstanding items and then open it up to the group for proposed changes. The first one here is regarding lead and art funding. Um, some of the presentations given to the task force are a little bit older, and I would really like to include the current status of art and lead funding, and I'm not exactly sure what that is. So if any of you can provide some insight into that, that would be great. Otherwise, I can reach out to Melora and Kayla and get that information. So
That's
that,
probably going to be the fastest, Jill,
okay,
is go through Kayla, obviously,
okay.
and Melora.
And I'll drop that in. I'll do that then. This notation here at the bottom of this page, Mayor Courthouse made a comment here. I wasn't sure how to, it's just something he noted in his first review of the annual report. Um, right here. And I wasn't sure if that's how this should be included in the annual report. I'm going to give him a second shot at reviewing this again and ask him to include specific language that he can ask to be included at the IPRTF meeting on June 22nd for specific language change, unless you guys have any other thoughts on this right here.
No, I don't. Anybody else? Birdie, unmute, please.
Okay, he's talking about the behavioral care center, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if it's really appropriate to try to determine an appropriate length of stay because people will be there for mental health issues, which is a medical issue and highly variable in the severity and in the particular treatment needed. So I don't think we non-medical folks can come up with anything. And the most we could do is look at existing practicing ones and see what their average lengths of stay are. But it concerns me to have the idea that there would be, quote, an appropriate length of stay because of the highly variable nature of mental illness and the type of people that will be there.
Yeah, and I think, Bertie, the way that I would word his suggestion if it's something he's going to insist on, is that I think it's reasonable for the IPRTF to review what's being proposed, right? Because that's what the IPRTF does. It looks at the programs and how they're operating. And so I think something like the IPRTF needs to review, do that review, or maybe, but it's not up to the IPRTF to
It
determine
isn't
those
even
things.
started yet, so
Right, right, right. So I think my inclination is just to delete this mention here, and if he feels passionately about it, he can make that motion at the full.
yeah. That would be my
Yeah.
suggestion. Once it's up and operational, of course, we'll want to monitor it in a variety of ways. But
Right.
Tasha?
I guess speaking to that, I think what I guess the thought process behind that is, it is a fairly expensive process. So like for budgeting and making recommendations, needing to know what those are, recognizing that until it's built and the bids are done, we're not going to know that. But, maybe having is there like I know that the operational costs right now, we've just been dealing with the building costs, but operational costs is, with everything being budget cutted right now, having something in the language of determining what it is that we can afford operationally, or at least recognizing that will have to be dealt with. I think it's good to note that has to be part of this process as well.
I think it's appropriate to recognize that it needs to be dealt with. I mean, the options are you limit admissions because you can't afford a greater staff, or you cut down the services. And I think there's difficulties in either direction, but that's a decision that would have to be made down the road, I think, as opposed to trying to somewhat arbitrarily put designs and restrictions on it now.
Yeah. I think this is a little bit clunky way of trying to figure out what operational costs are. And
Mhm.
Yeah, and there have been a couple of other non-specific suggestions he made that I asked him to simply bring specific language to the meeting and propose it that way, rather than me trying to interpret something he's trying to get at. So, but I
yeah,
just wanted to, this really is just my personal note of something that's gone unresolved in the
Mhm.
report yet, and it's still to be figured out.
yeah. Tasha?
Just reading the paragraph right above it is I guess, is he trying to direct what this resolution, as far as the work group, it says to address average length of stay and average, I don't know what ADP is, but
Average daily population.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
So-
and this paragraph is something that I put it in after. It's a newer paragraph, and I don't think he's seen this one before, because I've done some significant rewrites since that first draft. So I don't think he was commenting specifically on that paragraph.
And that
So-
refers
that
to-
paragraph might be actually addressing what he wrote.
Right. And yeah. Bertie?
that I just want to clarify that paragraph I take to be directed at the jail, average length of stay and average daily population of the jail, which we're targeting with diversion programs and speeding up delays, et cetera, right?
Right.
Okay.
In fact, you'll see in our next agenda item, we have some draft charters for those work groups that we want to get help, getting something finalized. So, okay, Jill, anything else on?
Yeah, just one more note to bring to your attention. This whole section on the sheriff's office programs, these presentations were given to the joint committees last year and early this year, and the sheriff indicated that it needed to be updated, but I have not gotten those updates from the sheriff yet. So I anticipate this changing somewhat to reflect current data. And I don't know what that will be or in what form, but just be aware that this section here on the sheriff's, these programs may change as well.
Okay.
And then last of all, I just wanted to let you know that I believe the JPOP committee is planning to review the final draft after today's meeting, at their meeting on the 18th, and may propose or recommend changes. And if that's the case, then the procedure would be for the task force representatives on the JPOP, which are Peter and Heather, to bring those forward to the IPRTF for consideration and amendments. So Peter and Heather, be prepared for that for the JPOP meeting on June 18th. So
All right.
those are my only notes. Did anyone else have any feedback after reviewing this final draft?
Not seeing any hands.
Nothing? You mean it's perfect?
No, we're good.
Wow.
Okay,
Awesome.
well, thanks for all your work, Jill. And as we get into our next item, I want to thank you again because our next item is talking about our IPTRF work groups that the county council has requested. And bless her heart, Jill got to work quickly and drafted some charters for us to look at. Regarding both of those work groups. And Jill, are you going to also put up the third one that was kind of the general work group
I wasn't
rules or
planning on it, but I can.
No, that's not necessary. I was just wondering. I remember we looked
Yeah.
at those three together, but
Yeah. Do you want me to screen share these too?
So in a second. So
Okay.
what we'll do is I just kind of wanted to introduce kind of where we are, and Heather's going to kind of help walk us through the draft, and so we can get some ideas on what the thinking is and where we kind of hope to see these groups go. So Jill, go ahead. And Heather, go ahead.
Okay. So, do you want me to just jump in, Barry? Yeah?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted.
You're good. Okay, so with the Whatcom County Council's budget cap resolution that was passed a month or so ago now, the county council has asked the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force to do some analysis and research and best practice gathering to answer some questions that will be really helpful, I think, for the council's deliberations over the coming months around the jail. And also, I think, for just the future of criminal justice work in Whatcom County. So we're going to go through each work group and just the overview of how we thought they could work and get your input and feedback and questions. And the goal is that we come out of this meeting with a good shared sense of the scope and what's next and approval to bring it back to the IPRTF for moving forward. Anything you would add, Barry, on, and I'll go through each work group, but anything on
No,
the,
that was perfect. Good way to
Okay.
clear it up. Thanks.
Great. So we'll go through
Can
them
I
one.
ask a question?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So what was the process in getting to where we're going to be? Who were you talking with and how did it all come about?
These two documents.
Yeah.
So Jill took from the minutes from the last couple of meetings, I think, where this has come up, and put the content into the template. And then Barry, I think, spoke with a couple of his colleagues, and then Jill, Barry, and I met to talk about some of the details. So that's the extent of what we did for background.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the first work group we'll go through is around average length of stay and average daily population. And the reason that those two factors are so critical are that the PASCO analysis that came out around jail sizing, in addition to just general practices from the field, those are the two most significant factors for how big a jail should be sized. And so average length of stay, average daily population, it's not always correlates to crime rates. And so and the PASCO report said that if we can keep our length of stay down to 20 days or less, I don't remember exact the numbers, but that the jail we could need through 2050 is smaller than if the length of stay increases, then the jail we need is bigger. So there's definitely a correlation there. So this first work group would be exploring that topic. The sunset date would be at the end of December, so this year. Barry will invite members, and I've volunteered to schedule and support the meetings. Part of the work group kind of rules are that there's no more than 10 members, at least 2, but no more than 10 work group meeting attendees will be members of the IPRTF. And then there's a strong consideration that understanding the county's current staffing budget and time constraints, that not all members will need to attend all meetings. And a work plan for the work group will be developed at the beginning of the process, and the attendance can be determined based on the meeting topics throughout that work plan. So the initial slate of individuals that would have some subject matter expertise important to really analyzing what goes into length of stay and how can that be improved safely, and what goes into average daily population and how can we gain efficiencies around that, are Barry and myself, and then the sheriff, the prosecutor or representative, Maya as a public defender and part of the IPRTF or her representative, a presiding judge, the Health and Community Services Department, Melora or Hannah, a community-based service provider with subject matter expertise in behavioral health and diversion. We're hoping Rosa Hunter, as an individual with lived experience, will join us, and then additional participants as needed on specific topics that come up. So per the council's resolution, the first progress report would be due at the end of August, and a final report would be due at the end of November. And the purpose, you can see, this is taken directly from the resolution, that the council requests IPRTF/Law and Justice Council to convene an average daily population and length of stay reduction work group, engaging the sheriff, prosecutor, public defender, presiding judge, the Health and Community Services Department, community-based service providers with subject matter expertise in behavioral health and diversion, and individuals with lived experience of incarceration, charged with identifying the policies, programs, and processes that most effectively reduce ADP and ALOS, and to report a prioritized set of recommendations for funding and sustaining those interventions to the County Council by end of summer 2026. So that's the overview. The expected outcome and deliverable would be that a report, and if possible, presenting for any policy, program, or process that's identified, what the action would be that's recommended, who's responsible for that action, or what group of people are responsible, and what the estimated impact would be or outcome would be for public safety. And then if we can, also prioritize options for funding and sustaining interventions. And I don't know if there's anything after that, Jill, to scroll down. Oh, then we're moving into work group 2. So I'll pause there. Any questions?
I've got a
Yeah.
couple questions. Did I miss a okay, so sheriff is the one law enforcement officer or representative on that 10-person committee. Is that right? Keeping an eye on public safety.
Yeah.
I guess the prosecutor would as well. Just that downstream, I just want to make sure that there's no question about the results not having been properly vetted by law enforcement for the very thing that you brought up, which is the importance of public safety. So are we
That's
feeling good
great
about that?
feedback. I think that is really great feedback. I think there's sensitivity to just capacity but
Oh, yeah.
I would personally welcome if there were one, two, or three more law enforcement leaders from different jurisdictions because the one of the driving factors in this whole conversation is that law enforcement needs the tool of being able to book people into jail when they need to, right?
Yeah.
And so they're a really key voice and perspective, obviously, in this
Mhm.
conversation. So that's really great feedback. And I wonder if we want to make an amendment and make a number 11 to say, as capacity and interest allows, two additional law enforcement representatives would be critical to this work group. Ideally,
Yeah.
it'd be wonderful to have them from Bellingham and
It would be
Ferndale,
just so great to have Bellingham Police Department's involvement again for legitimacy. It's just like I
Absolutely.
want their voice there, but I want everybody to know it once they see the results that this
When I
was,
when I was
yeah.
working on the resolution a month and a half ago or whenever, I met with Kim Lund and Janice
Hmm.
and discussed these work groups, and there was some interest
Yeah.
about about having a voice. So I think, Peter, that is possible, and I agree.
Okay.
I would like to have a small city rep too, either Linden or well, we got Tasha, but she's not representing Linden in this group. So we could have small cities, Bellingham, and then the sheriff's office.
I would love
Yeah.
that too.
I think that would be the one change I would recommend. And then and it's possible I just missed it. I've got a lot on my mind at this moment. What's the process that we have laid out for once, let's see, once the recommendation is made, does it come before IPRTF and then we discuss and vote on it and then we recommend it to the council, or what is that process? I'm sorry
Yes.
if I somehow missed that.
No, you did not miss that. That is a really critical part of how work groups are allowed through this process is that everything is transparent and comes back to the IPRTF, and the IPRTF is the body that would actually formally recommend anything to the
Yeah,
council. So
that's what we did with the BCC.
yeah,
So I would assume it would work just the same way.
yes, yep,
Okay.
yeah.
Tasha.
I guess looking at this list, number 8, I guess community-based providers. When I think of average length of stay and what impacts that, it is more the court system and the judges have the most impact on. I mean, there's state law as to how long someone's going to be in jail based off the what their criminal history is and what their risk of flight is, all those factors. I mean, there's the basic, if they're a first time offender, I mean, they're basically at a 0 and then they go up from there.
Mhm.
So that is where I think you have more ability to impact they would have the most say in impacting your average length of stay. As officers, I might advocate for a longer length of stay, but I've had some conversations with some judges and with like the Superior Court probation, and there are some things I think that could be done on their side. Some of it's information sharing from us, and that's a whole nother subject I know that we've been talking about for some time. But this is as far as like law enforcement specific. I mean, I'm all for more law enforcement and public safety, but the court system is where your length of stay, because I mean, the judges are deciding that, and how can we support them in making the most effective decision. And I know that I signed up for it, so I will be watching it at some point, but there was a decision out of California on pretrial release conditions. There was a training that came out, so I have it saved to watch it, but how is that going to impact? Because it's in the Ninth Circuit. So they've made some decisions on that. So that might have an impact on this already. And I just haven't had a chance to review the training.
Maybe we could make a note that when under presiding judge that we go both Superior Court and District Court. That way we have, both levels of the criminal justice system covered.
Well, and we might want to consider municipal courts too.
Yeah.
I wonder about, I'm trying to think of what the expertise would be with number 8 that would be critical for average daily bookings or length of stay. And the one place I go is if there were questions about if there was a community program that was robust to take diversion, let's say, would their expertise be helpful for a recommendation about like if we funded 2 more lead FTEs, they could take these kinds of charges in addition to what they're already doing as a caseload. But Melora would be able to speak to lead and Grace. So I think, that's fine. And then I wonder about having a with a number 11 or number 12 or under number 10, I should say, the additional participants may be invited to join a meeting on a specific topic. If we want to add for example, additional court and pretrial services representatives as available, right? And try to be really surgical with people's time in this season, because I could very much see the pretrial services being a critical voice in something in this too, as well as all the different parts of the courts. So I appreciate that feedback a lot.
Birdie?
My question is on the scope of this work group because I don't think I have really understood it clearly. If obviously all the varying diversion type programs have an enormous impact, and that would, in that setting, if that's part of the scope, I would think you very much would want community workers with the behavioral health experience and experience with diversion programs. What I'm hearing being discussed is a bit more on court efficiencies and those types of things, which also have an impact. So is this one committee expected to address the whole gamut, or are you thinking, I haven't seen what the other work groups are, but that seems like a lot for one committee, but perhaps they're the right people and it would work. But then I would certainly advocate for having community members with experience in diversion.
I think that's great feedback too, Bertie. I agree it's an ambitious scope and goal. And we're going to do our best, I think, and see how far we can get.
Try to address both.
Yeah, I think so.
That's fine. I just wanted
Yeah.
clarity on that.
Raylene?
I think the question comes back to what is your definition of diversion when it comes to this work group? Are you diverting people from the jail to alternative programs? Are you diverting them before there's even charges filed? I know that the courts are working on a uniform definition, but I have not seen anything clear that's came out. I have heard it used in several different versions. I know that you might get a definition of diversion from our public defense director as one thing, and then from prosecution as another thing. So if you're going to use this in a work group, I think you need to define what is diversion and what are you looking at to make this work. And then when you're talking about, the presiding judge and bringing in the municipalities, you got a lot of people in jail that, or that weren't going to be incarcerated until there was a felony charge. But now you have a felony charge that's incarcerated, and the municipal courts and the district courts that have had warrants on somebody that haven't been able to be successful now have somebody that's been possibly sentenced on a felony charge that's awaiting to go to DOC, because there's some other things that need to be happening. In the meantime, you've got now all of these municipal courts and district courts struggling to get their hearings and their cases resolved before somebody's shipped off to DOC so that they don't have active warrants when they go to DOC. So you've got a lot of overlap there that, although presiding might in a different court might want to have somebody incarcerated because of the space and the restrictions, they weren't able to do that. So I think it's not just, unfortunately, we're at the levels now that it's not just up to the judges, even if the judges say they want somebody booked and the warrant says they command the sheriff's office to take them. There's these safety concerns that come into play too. And I think Tasha has probably seen this firsthand, when trying to get somebody in custody that doesn't meet the requirements. Anyways.
I appreciate that feedback as well. And I think that one of the purposes of the work group is to create the space to have those conversations, Raylene, about like, well, let's even understand current state of, are there any charges or types of bookings that could be diverted? What even at this point, or have we maxed that out? What is in our control that we could influence that could even impact an average daily population or length of stay? And so I don't think that this is the stage to define what do we mean by diversion, but I do think the work group creates that space to talk through if there were 5 things the county wanted to try or do so that if we can't build the 1,000 bed jail, that it's not crowded on day 3,
Peter?
This is ambitious and it's great. Having spent last summer doing a work group of this sort, it's I'm just kind of curious who is going to be compiling all of the meeting notes and kind of building the understanding or the report, the model, however you want to describe it, as you go. I bring this up only to just forewarn you that it is a lot, and unless there's staff time, it's got to fall on somebody. And so I just wondered if you had thought that through.
If anyone knows the work it takes to do this, it is you. And so the wisdom is really welcome. And I think that the first meeting, that would be a really good thing to talk through is how are we documenting, who's in charge of that, what are the tools we're going to be using, and what's the ideal final state and details that will go in a report. I would recommend that that's just on the first agenda and that the people in the work group can sort that out at that first meeting. And today I hear that as an important requirement of the work groups, Peter, and I agree with you. So,
okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Tasha?
Just kind of building on what Raylene was saying. Yeah, like it's such a broad subject, when I think of average length of stay, they're already booked. I mean, if we're talking about diversion programs, and most diversions aren't available to some of the felony crimes, which is what mostly, I mean, we do get to book into jail on some misdemeanors, but there's a ton we don't. There's a lot of, and it's gotten better, but I mean, we've been having booking restrictions since, I don't know,
Since like
60 years.
1990, I think.
Yeah, I mean, severely, I would say 2010 is when it really was like we were altering a lot of how we were doing things to, and that, I mean, and those are the people that you want to capture early enough in there, starting to go down the bad choices decisions path, and to make these diversions most effective. So now that we're so far behind the curve, how are we going to play catch up on that? I don't know if that would come into this average length of stay, but I think there's a lot of inefficiencies within the court system that could, having that focus on the court system and the average length of stay, where that could have a bigger impact on current capacity or current people in the jail, and
That's great.
Hey, Sheriff, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And two things. Sorry for being late and sorry for being off camera. Hey, for the record, according to Wendy Jones, and this is some information that I gleaned from her 2 years ago, that the sheriff's office has been on booking restrictions since 1986. Two years after the main jail was built, and for a short time after the work center was built. But other than that, there has been continuous booking restrictions, contrary to what is put on Facebook, and contrary to what some people want certain segments of Whatcom County to believe. Also, I think what we need to do is, again, get a solid understanding of the number of warrants that are in Whatcom County, not just in district court, but in superior court and all the municipalities. It's this, elusive 10,000 warrants, that people talk about. And I believe that number was a number a few years ago, but that's not 10,000 people. That's 10,000 warrants. But we do need to contact the municipalities and really get a sense of where they are right now with these numbers. The court.
Tank, that was a conversation that I had with the mayor, and I've also had it with well, it doesn't matter. Talking about how we can do a qualitative analysis on the warrants, the outstanding warrants. Oh, I think I talked to the prosecutor's office. It's a big undertaking, I think, to do that analysis, but it might be definitely worth our while to do that work.
Well, I don't know if it's a big undertaking to get the raw numbers. Now, we do have a prior municipal court clerk on this call, and maybe she could tell us, what it takes for, a city to get us those numbers. But I do know a couple years ago, we were able to get those numbers. So that's one thing. And two, when we talk about the average length of stay, we do have a report that I send out every month, and I know Maya gets it, and I can send it out to this group, and it's broken up into just kind of buckets of how long people have been in the jail. And we do have some people that would be considered outliers that have been in the jail quite a long time, that definitely does affect our numbers in terms of even people that are there short term, because of the outliers that's been there so long, it would skew their numbers. So,
Mhm.
and that person I was talking about was Raylene. So maybe Raylene could just,
Yeah,
so
we figured that.
yeah.
Yeah. Raylene, do you want to jump in on that topic since you were named?
So I did pull the numbers before on the warrants. I had access to all the municipal courts and district courts before I left that world, the CLJs. And it was through a bit program. It isn't a simple process. You have to go in and change each section. There's a lot of new administrators throughout the municipalities that are all spread fairly thin in the courts. So knowing how to work those systems and to compile all that data, and then I worked directly with Caleb, who also worked with the health department, to take some of this data and then to streamline it. They can pull a report that just says how many active warrants they have in the system. That's simple. That's something they can do any week. It just takes about 60 seconds to do that. It's not going to necessarily give you all the dynamics in Excel spreadsheet, especially now that everybody's switching to a different system. But there is a way to do it. And it may be something that we can work with AOC. The good thing is that we now have a new individual working in district court that was working in Bellingham. And I'm pretty sure that she is very well versed on that program. So it may be something that we can talk to Jake and Rebecca and see if she can pull the data that I pulled. I think it was probably in 22 or 23, and sent it off to Caleb to kind of merge those. Superior Court's data doesn't come the same way, but we did run a report. Oh, I want to say it's been a year now, on all the warrants. Sometimes we can't clear warrants in cases when people are deceased, because we can't take them out of the system. When we don't have a record that's not from Washington State, from vital statistics that can confirm that somebody's deceased. So I just want to throw that in there as a monkey wrench, because I know that there's people that I'm pretty sure aren't with us anymore, but there's still active warrants for them. So you're always going to have those little tiny nuances. But this might be something that I can talk to Jake and Rebecca. They might be able to help pull the district and municipal court warrants that are active, and then I've got a team that can try to pull the Superior Court warrants, and we can probably run a different report. What we need to know is exact parameters on what you want, and we will probably have to take certain things out, but we should be able to try to put it in some type of an Excel spreadsheet so that we can put some of it together so that you can say, well, this person has 18 warrants, but we take the name out and say we can change it to a defendant. We might be able to leave some of that in, but we have to be very cautious and when we're looking at confidential data.
Hey, Raylene, are there other little glitches like the deceased thing that affect the warrants that
There's sometimes glitches on return of services, that we don't always get the information back. Something was served, but the courts don't get notified. We can't take it out of the system. So when you have staffing shortages, when you have retention, when you have turnover, when you're trying to train people, um, all of those things impact the accuracy in the details, right? So we always want to make sure we're trying to train our frontline staff the best we can, but when all you're doing is putting out fires, you can't always keep up with all of the minute details.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but you know, those are sometimes the contributors to some of the glitches. The glitches with the people that are deceased, you know, we come across those, and those are just some of the things that I know that, you know, we can't take it out. It's still there. We still have an active order. We still have an active warrant. We don't have anything that validates that they're not with us anymore. But if I can think of other little glitches, I'm happy to report on it.
All right, I got 3 hands up, and then I'm going to cut it off so we can get to our next work group. We're going to run out of time. Peter, go ahead.
This is just such an interesting issue. I remember reaching out to Raylene 2 summers ago and asking, how many warrants are there? Because it's always such a huge issue, right? And there's just so little information about it. I've got so many questions. I'd love to know, like, what databases is it that you pull reports from? How many reports have to be pulled? And why is it so difficult? I mean, I'm just looking for solutions here. And also, I've kind of lost the thread. How does warrants work into the ALOS work group?
I see two ways, but I'm not the expert. One is that when individuals get booked that have charges in different jurisdictions, that can contribute to length of stay as each jurisdiction runs a different process for clearing those, including warrants. And then also, warrants make up a significant booking population too. So if there were certain charges and warrants that could be handled by not booking them into a jail, but compelling them to come back to court in a different process, that could reduce that average daily population and booking, cohort as well. But I am not the expert in the system, so all the other experts, if there's other ways that warrants play into this work group, it'd be awesome to hear your thoughts too.
But I also see it as an opportunity, especially for a municipal court judge, but it's up to them if they want to refer them to alternative sentencing. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Tasha?
Well, I mean, warrants can impact, but it's almost like its own separate. It could be almost its own separate sub work group, because it still comes down to it's a little logistics about how the court system and the prosecutor and defense attorney working through getting trials, getting things going so that people who are in jail are getting their day in court, so that a decision can be made either to, whether they're found not guilty or they are transferred to a DOC facility, or they're giving a final date and they've already served that amount of time and they can get out. So like for when I think of ADP and ALOS, like the pretrial and those things. Now, for me, for a lot of warrants, it'd be interesting to see the difference between gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor warrants versus superior court warrants, because it's a rarity that I can't book a superior court warrant. It's less rare that I am declined for a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor warrant. And depending, the daily levels change and can impact that. So I know in a lot of other jurisdictions, and I don't know if this is true in Tennessee and Ohio, that people visited when looking at the new jail system, but a lot of other agencies, they book everything. They don't do criminal citation summons that then become warrants, because they never, because we're delaying them having their day in court for at least 3 weeks from the time of the incident, because we're just giving them a criminal citation versus a lot of agencies, they just book immediately. They may be out within 24 hours, but they've already had their first initial hearing. So you're not delaying a lot of the process starting. Because if I arrest someone for like a theft of some sort, they're not going to have a court hearing for 2 weeks or their first arraignment, and then the whole process starts and that's only if they happen to show up. If they don't show up, there's a warrant, and then it could be a year or two more before we ever catch up to them. So that's its own separate sub work group almost.
Yeah, it sounds like I think I agree with you, Tasha. It sounds like important work, though. I think most everybody I've talked to and even mentioned that everyone agreed that is something that we really need to get a handle on. All right, let's go through our next work group.
And I'll just add to Tasha that I look at these work groups as getting us further in our shared understanding of what the opportunities are. And so it may not answer all and certainly will not answer all of the questions, but it'll help us to the next phase of better questions to be asking. And maybe in November, we recommend there's a warrant sub work group that launches to really dive into the warrant issues too. But we'll learn more and enough to have a better scope for that work group as well. So, work group 2 is about the 50-50 funding. And if you want to scroll down to members, again, we want to understand staffing and budgets and time constraints. And these meetings can be, I think there's subject matter expertise that will be really critical that doesn't have to be a part of every single meeting. So for the core group, we talked about myself, Barry, Brian Estes has volunteered and asked to be on the group. That's great. Mayor Scott Cortice or Mayor Kim Lund, ideally both. Implementation or their designees, of course. Because some of the 50-50 has to do with the implementation plan, actually it all has to do with the implementation plan projects, having one of the co-creators of that plan and the former IPRTF co-chair, Stephen Gockley, and then the Finance and Facilities Advisory Board member and also former co-chair, Jack Hovenier, but having optional invited guests that could include subject matter expertise from corrections officers, victim representatives, county budget experts, such as Steve Oliver or Randy Rydell. And when we go to this one, we have a progress report due September 30th, final report due November 30th. And the purpose is to develop additional recommendations to fund the Justice Project Implementation Plan services, projects, and programs enumerated in the Interlocal Agreement, Part 2, Section 3E, including but not limited to the use of proceeds from any future sale of the LeBounty Road property, if such option is feasible, as well as grants, reimbursements, and excess revenue above conservative baselines. So if you scroll down a little more, we talked about developing recommendations to fund the Justice Project Implementation Plan projects 1 through 15. And that also, this work group may define booking restrictions for use consistently across the current or subsequent ILAs and any other planning efforts to achieve a common understanding of what no booking restrictions means. The work group may consider how to eliminate booking restrictions through the construction of an appropriately sized jail based on a fair analysis of jail use, bookings, and population growth, taking into consideration strategic investments to avoid unnecessary incarceration. The work group will consider how to quantify the 50-50 funding balance asked for in the implementation plan, and will consider whether there is a minimum of 50%, aka the floor of ongoing countywide sales tax revenue and other funding being directed to qualifying investments, with the goal of reaching that floor no later than 2030. The work group is allowed to consider behavioral health supports, treatment, and trauma-informed design aspects of the jail as legitimate behavioral health spending, And the work group may identify other ways the implementation plan commitments can be met aside from the public health, safety, and justice sales and use tax, including additional grant opportunities such as opioid fund monies, ESHB 2015 public safety funding program grant funding, or any other possible funding sources. And again, these will come to the IPRTF, and the IPRTF will deliberate and make final recommendations to the county council. And in summary, the report would include the following topics: recommendations to be considered for an updated ILA. Again, this is for county council to ultimately use whatever is useful for them. And when a 50-50 funding scenario could be reasonably achieved, and a brief breakdown of expenditures within each implementation strategy and where funding came from, similar to how the city of Bellingham did a breakdown and they submitted to the Whatcom Racial Equity Commission around how they're, as a city, funding different pieces of the implementation plan. Any questions, feedback on this specific work group?
Pasha,
Again, who again is in this work group? Because when you talk about booking restrictions, I guess like there's no law enforcement perspective on what a booking restriction is, because that's who. I guess that was my only, like, why would this group be the defining of what is a booking restriction for all other groups as
Can
it
I
relates?
speak to that? Sorry, I don't have a raised hand icon there. And I think rereading this now with fresh eyes after having stepped away from it from a week or so, I don't like my wording of that item number 2. I think it came from the sheriff said he has those definitions and was going to share them with us and just make sure that those his current booking restrictions, everyone understands them across the board. And Sheriff, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. The intent here was definitely not for this group to come up with booking restrictions. So I'm happy to reword that whole phrase right there if it's coming across that way.
Yeah.
Sheriff Tank.
Yeah, so the idea is to fully explain how booking restrictions work and the ideology behind it. The actual Tasha's right, it doesn't contain any definitions, but it will be a full explanation of how the booking restrictions work.
Maybe that's better as an IPTRF main topic on for the main task force. What do people think about that?
Will you repeat what the topic would, what part of the booking restrictions would be IPRTF?
The booking restrictions piece.
Just all of it?
Yeah. So I would fully explain how the booking restrictions work, in and out, from top to bottom. I'll also explain how I changed the booking restrictions in February of 2025 versus to how they were prior to that.
I think that would be an incredible presentation and help level set what actually is the current state. How I see booking restrictions being a part of the work group, or how I could see it, is as useful as possible. I think it's in the interlocal agreement. That seems to be kind of the tension of the city saying, you promised no booking restrictions, but then there's no definition around what does that mean. And we've talked about that if you take that to the nth degree, for the example, that could mean we need a jail of 10,000 beds so that tomorrow all 10,000 people with warrants get booked, which we know is an inflated number. But, and so what actually does that mean from the city's perspective, which is why I think the mayors were representing that on the financial side, Tasha, and the corrections officers were there in the as available as needed to give the law enforcement perspective, because I think this one was really trying to focus on the money pieces. But I think Jill's edits feel welcome, and it can be very much as helpful as the council considers the next ILA. What are things that might be helpful in a definition, even if it's just listing out the factors of what a booking restriction definition could or should include if it's going to be part of contractual language.
Yeah, and I think what's confusing is when we say definition, because
Yeah.
it's really a process, you
Okay.
know, you know, and not a definition.
Peter?
And
Oh, go
and
ahead.
yeah, just to give you an example, when I changed the booking restrictions in 2025, and I think I sent out a 2.5, maybe 3 page instruction to all law enforcement. So it's definitely not a definition, it's a process.
I think that's such a key thing that you just shared to help people
Yeah.
understand, because then if it's a process, even having that defined, if it's in a contract that it's a requirement that there's no booking restrictions, it's like, well, but it's a process that the contract's not in charge of. And so it's sort of an interesting, I think it's a helpful piece to really have a little more clarity and guidelines around in the interlocal, where it lives in the interlocal, you know.
Peter.
That is so interesting to hear that it's a process, because it is talked about in the ILA and in the community as a definition. So whatever it takes, I really hope that we spend the time beyond just a presentation to the IPRTF tank to get some sort of statement around it that can be attached to the ILA, or referred to by the ILA. I've heard such things years ago when we were talking about and no booking restrictions, and having a trigger in the ILA for when there were booking restrictions for a certain period of time. Is that right? Or am I maybe conflating that with folks, maybe population of the jail? I cannot recall, but having a statement around that for the community that we can all refer to and all look at together, I think would just be so helpful. It would just be so helpful to everybody. So I encourage us to work on that. And then, since I have the floor again, just bringing up the question around who is going to be doing all the work on this, because this is a significant course of work, and how that gets done with volunteers. So, thanks.
Tasha.
Yeah, I think that the hang up for me was the word define, because it is something that, as a street level, a booking restrictions means I can't book that day. Or when I have someone, I can't book them. But for like triggering, as Peter mentioned, do we have to now add on to this jail? Because, so I think defining that, or not defining, but the process for the ups and downs of when we have booking restrictions. Because I get it. Like if we had a huge event, maybe a giant protest where 30 people were breaking out all the windows downtown, so we arrested 30 people, that's going to impact our ability to book in the next several hours, because just the processing through that would be a booking restriction, but it's not going to maintain. It just takes that time. So the factors that make that ebb and flow, and how can we impact those factors to reduce the amount of restrictions that we have, or well, preferably not have any, except for those one-off crazy situations.
Okay, any other, Jill?
So what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm hearing this wrong, is from this charter, remove number 2 entirely and instead make something or a discussion of the booking restrictions an IPRTF agenda item. And in change this language, however, it ends up to be clear that the process that these are about processes and not definitions. And that possibly one suggestion is whatever the sheriff, whatever documentation the sheriff provides to do this review could be included in the list of documents that the members will have available to them when they are on this work group, is the sheriff's processes for booking restrictions. Am I getting this even close?
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
I think that way the more people that this gets in front of, the better. I just didn't want to bury it into a work group. And
Okay. Great. Thank you.
all right, anything else on work group number 2? 50.
Hey, I do want to throw it out there to Tasha that if Tasha wants to work on this with me, I certainly would like to help her.
Sure, I'll help you out. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, look at that connection. It's great. All right, let's move to our next item, which is crime victim perspective. If this is from our May IPTRF meeting, and who's going to cover the recommendation for a panel on the J-pop? Is that Tasha?
That is simply a suggestion that's been mentioned a couple of times. I think once from the May IPRTF. And yeah, it was a suggestion for the J-pop committee. So I'm not sure if Tasha's heard this. It was discussed at that meeting.
I can speak to that. So I've actually brought it up multiple times myself to do as we do these different panels of lived experience and like the housing one we just had. So we did in our last planning meeting for the J-pop meeting that is coming up. We did discuss putting together a victim panel. It's probably not going to be until September at the earliest, because our next meeting is focusing on some discussion points that came up from our last housing panel that we hosted last month. And then we wanted to follow up, because we're on this housing discussion, that our next one be lived experience housing, people who are living in those housing first. So we were going to try and target people that are actually utilizing those services and their experiences. And then, so there's 2 other big ones. One was the victim panel, and then another one is a restorative justice panel. Apparently some people went to some recent training on what is restorative justice, so they wanted to have a panel about like what does that look like and what training is out there that they've received. Maya was one of them. And so those are the 2 panels. We did discuss a victim panel, and we kind of wanted to know what information do you really want out of those? I mean, you have to be very sensitive when you have victims on as to speaking about what happened to them, versus are we wanting to focus on their experiences in the court system, and is there ways that we can improve their experiences as they move through the criminal justice system? So those, we started kind of listing questions we want to hear from crime victims about, and it was very broad, and we just wanted to be very take a little extra time to determine what questions our panels most wanted to get out of victim panels, versus just not just their stories as to what happened, but what can we learn and what can we take away from that to improve the criminal justice system as a whole.
Could I add on or respond? And Peter, I see you're unmuted. Do you have something too that you wanted to share?
I'm trying to decide whether I want to share it. You
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. Also, just a point of order, we didn't vote on if we're good with the work groups, if there's a next step there, but we can come back to that. And to move it to IPRTF. But for the victims, what I'll add, Tasha, is something I've heard for a few years, well, many years, and I think it's really important, is we aren't considering the victim's perspective as much on the IPRTF, and that we need to be invisibly doing that. And some of the questions that I would love to understand are, I think the empathy for what was the impact of that action on somebody, whether it was the theft or the assault or whatever somebody's comfortable sharing, right? And I'm curious, what does justice look like for those individuals? Help us understand what you needed in those moments, from the community, from programs, just in the same way that we think about that with people who are going through the incarceration system. Like, what we need to also take care and be thoughtful about that accountability piece. Like, what is accountability? I know justice is a kind of a loaded word because it's hard to, what is justice? But the accountability, I think our community has a chance to really get that, to build that like compassion and accountability in a really thoughtful, intentional, innovative, important way, and having a victim's perspective in what does accountability actually look like to them, knowing that that is one person's walked experience, yes, but I think that would be a really valuable perspective for our community to hear, for our task force to hear, and to have that in our consideration as we're thinking through how do we safely reduce incarceration, and the flip side of when is it not safe to reduce incarceration? When is that really the appropriate thing? And what more can we be doing as a community to care for the victims of crimes and make sure that their voices are heard and that they have input into these kinds of policies too? And the second bullet item under this topic is we've also talked about, should we have a seated victim voice on the task force itself? And then, and in all of this, similar to what you were saying, what's our conduct of care for all of our lived experience panels? Because we do not want to ever re-traumatize somebody in sharing their story. We don't want to be extractive. We don't want to be spectating. And the way every email makes a difference. It can't be performative. It has to be authentic care. And so what is our appropriate way of doing that and caring for people in those spaces? And so I think that's why we wanted to bring it here to the steering committee to really be thoughtful about that. The panel can happen without that, seat on the official task force. I think that could move forward even as we think through how would we invite somebody like that to the task force, knowing that the things we talk about might be really hard for somebody who's gone through some crimes on the victim side too. But their voice, like, oh, it's just tricky, right? And so, anyway, that's my raw perspective, just to add to the.
And there's, not to say there's different types of victims, but there are, in a way, I mean, you have your very intimate victim crimes, your sexual assaults, even just your physical assaults. It's very up close and personal. And then I know we've had a lot of discussions about thefts and how is that impacting our businesses. And so they are victims too. But it's once removed. It's a victim towards their business, which impacts their, ability to have a business, but it's not necessarily the same. Or do we divide the two? Do we have them on the same panel? So there's just, I guess, do we have people that are living next to homeless camps, and how is that impacting their just overall? They might not be a direct victim, as in someone stole or damaged their home or did something, but it's living next to that type of environment. How is that and just overall impacting their feeling of safety in a community? So those are like, it's a very broad, like, is there one over, because as forming questions to victims to not traumatize any of them further, you want to form the questions to kind of get to what it is that we're trying to understand. And it is going to be so broad, but not it. So do we have a couple different types? One that's more, if we find more intimate victim type situations where it's like very personal one-on-one, domestic violence, because domestic violence is a whole nother side of victimhood. Not side, but it's usually such a long-term victimhood over, it's usually not a one-off. They've been victimized for a very long time before they reach out for help. So it's when we started discussing it, it was just such a, like, where do we start? So then it was like, okay, well, let's ask you guys we can do multiple types of panels. What would you, in this moment in time with these decisions that you're trying to make or we're trying to form, what would be most helpful in deciding when to place these victim panels to you guys?
Peter.
It's an interesting conversation to be involved in for me, because I was the victim of an assault, and also numbers of thefts. And some reflections are, I'm feeling emotional just listening to this conversation. And I can imagine one person, a trained person, being assigned to make sure that they are responsible for the people who are on the panel, meaning calling them beforehand, talking with them, giving them the assurances that they can stop at any time, and then a follow-up call. And we have people in the community who are spectacular at that, and I've met them after crimes. I can't remember what the officer support, is that what they're called, Tasha? Those folks are just amazing. Anyway, that is all to say, there is actually, I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone in having been a victim of various crimes, but I am on the IPRTF. That is not my seat, but and I've never spoken to it, but I would certainly be willing to speak about it and and because I followed each perpetrator through the court system, or lack of their being held accountable. So anyway, that's just to say I'm here for that and think it's important.
And I appreciate you sharing that. I was aware that you've had multiple instances. So I guess speaking to that specifically, do you think it would be a better thing to have a separate one where you're talking to your physical assault and that personal violation to your body versus your thefts from your businesses? Do you think those could be on the same panel?
Right. I mean, they're just all so, yeah, they're all so invasive. Even having somebody in your home stealing things is so invasive. Yeah. Not like a rape, obviously, but still, it's hard for us to be the arbitrators of what is serious and what is not,
Yeah. Yes, 100%. So, yeah. But that's just, we were like going, and then when you speak of victim advocacy, I mean, we could have a panel on DBSAS, support officers, the crime victim advocates in the courthouse, and the work they work with victims and helping them process through the court processes. So that's a whole different panel that we could do as it relates to victims. So
I can imagine we're never going to get it right, but I do want us to move forward with something. And yeah. I just want to say I appreciate how complex it is.
So yeah, we will probably have one by September, October, where we've got like we'll do this one. This one is the discussion and the site visits. August is going to be housing lived experience panel with people who are living in the housing properties, because we're kind of on this housing stretch. And then I think technically August, I think, is when we don't have our meeting. And so it would be September, October when we'll plan for a victim panel.
If I could add, I love your suggestion, Peter, about I think we should have a protocol of a designee from the task force or from the committee calling and having a conversation and really supporting, like their job is to be the supportive person during these panels and after, and to make sure afterwards there's a call with a processing moment and a gratitude, and I also think part of the protocol should be a reminder to the committees or the task forces who are listening that these are really tender and important, just to say it out loud into the space, right? That how do we want to take care of people as a committee and what's appropriate and what isn't, and just being thoughtful about that. For questions for a victims panel too, I mean, I have dozens. Some may not be appropriate at all. But I would love to understand, if you could have gotten full and perfect accountability, what would that have looked like for you? Or maybe you did and you feel like that was resolved, and what was good about the way the case was processed. What was good. I'm always curious about how can the system do a better job? Where can we do better for victims? And what parts felt like we could have done better? And then I think if our goal is, safe and healthy outcomes, I'd love to just ask, as we consider policies around court efficiencies or programs to try to reduce recidivism, or what charges shouldn't be booked into the jail and what should. Just even knowing from their perspective, what should we be always remembering as we're considering all the different lenses in those policies from a victim of crime perspective? What would they like to make sure that the policymakers always remember and think about? Because I'm not sure everyone pauses to have that moment of imagination or empathy about when somebody's getting released who was a DV offender, what that feels like for the victim, right? And that fear and I think that it would be powerful if somebody's in a place where they could share whatever their feelings are. And I also think it's interesting to the restorative justice pieces, that if the county formally supports restorative justice practices or policies or programs in some way, is there any advice they would give us about that? Or if they went through any of those kinds of processes, what could have gone better, what didn't make sense at all? Obviously, anything that's on their heart that they would like to share into the space too, I think is welcome.
So we have about 5 minutes left. Heather, do we want to propose a position on the task force for that victim slot? Do we want to move forward with that?
I personally would.
I would too. There's just so many reasons, complexities that would keep us from doing it, but it's so important. So I think the only way we're going to do it or figure out how to do it well is to try it.
Mhm.
And
I
you
agree.
know, I believe that all the people on this call and on J-Pop are just the right people to pull this off. And let's make it happen.
Why don't we put
That's
that,
my
let's
personal
put that
opinion.
on our task force agenda for the next meeting.
Uh-huh.
So we can get an official kind of go ahead, and then we can move forward and get the ordinance prepared and have the council do it before we break in August. Let's get it done early this summer. Bertie.
I just want to remind us that being a victim is a very sensitive, emotional place to be. And you hear one victim's story, and to some degree, you hear one victim's story. In other words, people will be at all different places along the healing journey, and some crimes are probably more onerous than others. And so if we're having, quote, one representative to represent the victim side of things, I think we have to be very sensitive and very careful. And I'm very supportive of hearing from victims. At the same time, I just want to be very sensitive and not kind of a subtle expectation that you now speak for victims, because I've seen that happen in other settings, not with victims, but one person of a disadvantaged group is suddenly the token representative, and it's a very uncomfortable place for them to be. And so it's a cautionary note, not a no. I just want to
Well, I've
highlight.
I've heard this comment several times in this meeting, so I think I think we're all on the same page, and we would do our best anyway to approach it very, very gently. I think the other thing I to just briefly about is a legislative agenda. D Peter, is that a work group ready to
Yeah,
spin
yeah, absolutely is.
for this
And
season?
we've got some meat, which I can talk about. I have to have a couple of conversations before I can talk through it. But yeah, we can spin that up. Um, we're all ready to go.
Okay, that sounds good. Do you where do you want to solicit input from? Just from the group, or do we want to go to other advisory groups, or what do we want to do?
I think that let's see, there were four of us, maybe five of us on this, and we just need to have a meeting, I believe, and then we can start reaching out to, as we did last time, to the executive's office and wherever else. Well, obviously, we'd love to talk to any council members um, and other members of the IPRTF. As I recall, we did get a late start last year, but it was helpful, and we followed some things through, and we reported out to the IPRTF. And but this year, we'd be starting earlier, and so we'll be in better shape.
All right, that sounds good. Jill, you get the last word.
Oh, I just wanted to ask if that is an agenda item. I'm assuming should be on the task force agenda on June 22nd. And Peter, will you be the person to speak to that? The legislative.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to.
Thank you. And the other thing, Barry, I will do my best to have some kind of an ordinance adding an IPRTF member, but I don't know if I can get anything done final before the June 22nd meeting, as I'm going to be off work.
Oh no, I don't think we're in that big a hurry. So we want to get it through the IPTRF first. So if we got something ready even in July, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll make your August adoption deadline, but I will do my best. I just wanted to maybe
Okay.
set some expectations there. Thank you.
That sounds good. Folks, great discussion today. You're all just your magic brains. So we will see you later.
Oh, hold
We're-
on. We have
Oh.
public comments.
Oh, yeah.
And Dean White, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Hi, this is Dean White, and I just wanted to make a comment on the average length of stay and average age population work group. The goal that was described under the scope, it seems to me, focuses on what can be prescriptive coming out of the work of that work group. But it seems to me there is a prior set of work that needs to be done that's really much more descriptive, and that's identifying both qualitatively and quantitatively what the drivers of those two measures are. Because I just don't think you're going to be successful in coming up with recommendations without first arriving at a good understanding of what the drivers are. And you've talked about several of them, warrants and what happens in the court process, whether there are diversion opportunities prior to booking and so on. But I just think you need to add a segment that really first focuses on a description of what currently exists and in what degree. And I just might mention that we heard this morning in an all-staff meeting of the Health and Community Services Department from our person who does the quality improvement work for the department. And she'd be a good person to talk to about just the models of how you go about doing that kind of analysis of process improvement. And that's Amy Fuller. She'll probably be mad at me for offering her up, given her workload, but I just think it's worth considering.
All right. Well, thanks, Dean.
Thank you, Dean. Marty, is there anything you'd like to speak to the committee about? So you can raise your hand. I don't see Marty's hand raised, and I don't see anyone in our conference room. Barry, if you have a couple of minutes after the meeting to.
I really don't. I'm already
Okay.
2 minutes late to my next meeting, so
No problem. Thanks.
sorry. Shoot me an email or something. I'll get back to you today, though.
Will do.
Okay. All right, everybody. We are adjourned. Have a great rest of your week.